Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Wednesday, February 2nd, North Middlesex Council meeting. Once again, we are holding this meeting virtually. I will call the meeting to order. Everyone is here. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. If you do have any, please send them in writing through to our clerk. Minutes of the previous meeting from January 19th. Any errors or omissions or business arising? Seeing none. We need a motion to pass our minutes from the 19th. Moved by Councillor Nichols, seconded by Councillor Moyer. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We have quite a number of department reports tonight. We're going to start the first one with it is a report entitled the Fire Prevention and Investigation Program for 2021. At this time, I turn it over to our fire chief, to Greg.
Your worship, members of council. I've asked Colin Toth, the Director of Emergency Services for Middlesex Center, to present his report on fire prevention and investigation for 2021. Chief Toth.
Hoping everyone can see that.
Yep.
Good. Thank you. Thanks for the intro, Greg. Through you, Mayor, to council. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come and chat with you tonight about our year-end report for our shared fire prevention investigation program. As in my report, the purpose of this report is to ensure that that we keep you aware of the progress and effectiveness, and of course the cost of our shared program. This is all detailed in my report. So as I'm sure all of you had the opportunity to review the report, I'm not going to reiterate a lot of the points in there, but I would like to touch on a number of notables for 2021 that weren't report worthy, if you will. So firstly, unfortunately, we lost our fire prevention, our initial fire prevention officer that was part of our program. Ryan Easveld decided to go back to the private sector for opportunities there, but we were able to grab a hold of a fantastic fire prevention officer with a firefighting background who lives locally, and her name is Carol Huxley. So she spent 10 plus years with Strathroy Fire, so she's an amazing addition to our team, and she's already hit the ground running, and she's getting right into our program and managing right where Ryan left off. And just to touch on the COVID piece from our perspective, from an inspection side of things, the last 2 years, 2020 and into 2021, we unfortunately lost a lot of time to getting out on the street and doing a lot of inspections. And all in all, I think we lost up to almost 5 months of good solid inspections. So our cycle, our program cycle is delayed a little bit, but not overly much. So as I mentioned in my report, we are on a 4-year cycle. So it's based on risk and risk mitigation. So as it sits right now, we have about 50 inspectable properties that remain to be accessed in North Middlesex. So what that really means, inspectable properties are simply properties that are under the influence of our fire code. So these don't include residential occupancies, more so institutional, like our vulnerable occupancies, our care facilities, everything from that to subways to multi-use residential rentals, apartments, group homes, this type of stuff. So with that said, just to jump into some of the charts. So the fire inspections by risk level, you can see that. So just to explain this a little more, I know some of you maybe have gone through and added up some of the numbers. So the fire inspections by risk level, those are based on routine and request inspections. So there's your number variation there. Fire inspections by type, if we jump down to that one, that includes our routine request complaints and our re-inspections. So we find that until we get through our complete cycle, there will be a number of re-inspections. But once we get rolling and our cycle is mature, if you will, we will see less violations, thus less re-inspections. Just quickly on investigations, we didn't do a lot of investigations this year in North Middlesex. We only had 3 to do, but they are very, very time consuming. A lot of reporting, a lot of pictures, a lot of a lot of times bringing in the fire marshal's office and this type of stuff. So we had 3 fire investigations in North Middlesex for 2021. Other than that, I think I'll just leave it at that and open the floor to questions. I'm happy to address anything that you'd like to chat about.
Right, thank you, Colin. If we can get that presentation taken down, we'll ask council if they have questions. Thank you. All right, questions from council on this? Any questions from council on it? Deputy Mayor Cornelison?
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Colin, I'm just looking at the graphs here, and something that caught my interest a little bit was the number of inspections for North Middlesex and Thames Center far outweigh those done in Middlesex Center, which caught me a little bit by surprise. Can you help me understand that?
Through you, Mayor, to Deputy Mayor. Yeah, so I decided that we'd try to service our partners a little more because we did get behind on the cycle due to COVID, and we although we do have more inspectable properties, I just felt that it would be prudent to jump on the getting the partners done a little more. With that said, though, it's really based on inspectable properties, and it's a cost by use basically program. So Thames Center definitely has the majority of the inspections, and then us, and then you guys in North Mid. We do hit the vulnerable occupancies and the high risk. Those are really our priorities for that cycle every year.
Thank you very much. That explains a great deal. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Any other questions from council? No other questions? At this time, thank you, Chief. Thank you for your time and joining us, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll go to our second report, and that is from the
Mayor,
manager.
Mayor Rob,
Sorry, go ahead.
can we get a motion to accept that report, please?
Okay, yes, sorry. Need a motion to accept the report. Councillor Hemming, Councillor McClinchy, all in favor? Thank you. Thanks, Jackie. Report from Manager of Infrastructure and Operations on the meter core meter installation reading and maintenance proposal. And Jonathan Lampman.
I'm just having them pulled in, Your Worship. So
Okay, Jonathan Lampman's going to bring that one forward. If you're ready, Jonathan.
I am. Mayor, members of council, what you have in front of you is the meter core meter installation reading and maintenance proposal. I'll read the recommendation. If we have to touch on it later, we can reread it. But the recommendation is that council receive this report and direct staff to enter into a contract with meter core to accept the proposal to install, read, finance, and maintain plus or minus 1,216 water meters in Park Hill, Nairn, Elsa Craig for an initial 10-year term. In addition, that we as staff bring back a final agreement to council for execution upon mutual agreement on terms, costs, services provided by meter core for final signing, or an alternative recommendation that you have is that council directs staff to reevaluate all 4 options in 2023 during the budget process. So there's a lot in this report. Basically, meter core was in, I forget when they were in last, but since then, we've basically gone back and forth, and we've looked at the options that council asked us to look at. So you'll see that the baseline in that report is set with the meter core proposal, the one that was brought to you guys, I think it was in November. Additionally, what we did is we had meter core price the positive displacement meters that Strathroy installed. Now, we couldn't use Strathroy's numbers just because they purchased 7,000 versus the 1,200 that we're going to purchase. So we got a fair market price from Mr. Martin to install the 1216. I can go through the options if you want. If you've read it and you have questions, I can deal with it that way. There's a fair amount there, a fair amount of options and variability to the options. I'll open the floor to questions. I think that's probably the easiest way to go through it.
Okay, do you want to start with questions, or would you like him to go over those options a little bit? What's the wish of council? You have questions? Councillor Keel?
Thank you, Mayor Rupp. Might as well go over the options and then at least we'll have an equal playing field on argument points.
Okay.
Fine. Okay, so basically what I've done is I presented 4 options to council for their consideration. Under the discussion section, you're going to see basically 8, 9, 10 points that to consider with the option, lead times, what staffing involvement and so on. So to delineate the options, so Camstrup, which is the meter supplier, which is via Mike and MeterCore, is your option 1. This is the baseline. This is what we talked about at the last proposal. This is what's included in the 2020 budget. Option 2 is we basically switch from a Camstrup meter to a Badger positive displacement. So digital Camstrup, positive displacement, Badger. Basically what I've done there is I've got our capital cost, which you'll see is the 657. I've carried the 5.8% cost of financing to baseline it to the Camstrup proposal, put it there, and then I show you what we would, if we had to hire somebody specifically to maintain and read the meters after the initial installation. In this option, MeterCore would mobilize, they would do the installation of the 1216, and then they would leave. Now there is warranty, so on and so forth, but they would leave. The first option is where we put a new hire in purely for meters. Option 3, again, the Badger. Capital, so basically MeterCore comes in, they install them, we amortize it over the 10 years, and then we would do it in-house. So between North Middlesex and Aqua. So North Middlesex being our civil engineering technologist, myself, and then Aqua's crew would do the maintenance and installation. You'll see that there's obviously a change in price because it is in-house and we're not hiring somebody. And then option 4, basically the difference here is that I drop off the cost of financing. So to note in that, so you don't have a 10-year amortization. We would have to consume the cost all within a given year. So it would save money over the 10 years, but it would impact our rates more because we'd have to come up with all the cash in the first year, the given year. Couple other things to highlight. Camstrup's about a 20-week lead time to get the meters from date of order. And we're looking at over a year right now for the Badger meters. Now, as everything is going and everything is right now, either of those companies receive a large order between now and the time we award, those timelines can extend. If they fulfill orders, they can come back in line a bit, but it's all variable. That's a basis of basically what we're looking at here with the 4 options.
All right, questions from council? Councillor Keel?
Thank you, Mayor Rupp. Jonathan, if I remember correctly, Aqua was not in the meter installation business because they just have not had great success with that. But did I understand that Aqua would be installing those meters?
Through the mayor to Councillor Keogh, I've been engaging Aqua for the better part of a year to take this on. It's always been in the background that, you know, it's an ever-changing environment. Meter installers, meter maintainers, they're going away. Proposals like what Mike has produced are basically the new option for this kind of service unless we do in-house. We had a meeting with Aqua last Friday, and they are working on a proposal to do the installation of the 1216, to produce a price to do it, and produce a price to do the maintenance and meter reading for us. I don't have it yet, but they're taking a look at it. They're working with Aqua internal to see what that would look like to them. As for current though, they are not in the meter reading or maintenance business. No, they're not.
Thank you.
Councillor Hemming and then Councillor McClinchy.
Yeah, I have a question and I'd like to know what the rest of the councilor's opinion is on it. I'm wondering if this might not be a good time to be doing this with everything that we have coming up on our plate. And it isn't something that is in dire straits needing done. If we approve this tonight, then it all gets in motion and gets started, right?
Through the mayor, if you
On the
follow that
motion.
first, yeah, if you followed that first recommendation, Councilor Hemming, and you accepted that recommendation, yes, we would start into it tomorrow. But you'll notice that I did put, it's not a deferral, but it's a reevaluation later on as also an alternative recommendation for council to consider.
Okay, all right.
Okay, Councilor McClinchy?
If this whole program goes together, and if whatever option we go with, option 3, we're talking about Aqua doing the installation, what impact does that leave on the householders, their rates? Like, is this, I think I need to be updated to get on the cost. Is it going to be a cost to the homeowner? The municipality buys the meters? I can't remember how the figures were. And what cost would be once, if we go with Aqua to install it, what cost is it to the householder? Or is there any? When they put it in there installed, because I do remember when we had our last meters put in, we had to pay a fee to have them installed in there, in our house.
Okay, Jonathan?
Through the mayor to Councillor McClinchy, the way that these proposals, all 4 of your options have been built, is that it would go to the rates. So it wouldn't be an individual charge per residence for the meter to be installed. It would go to the up to the rate, and then the rate would pay for it. So all the users of the North Middlesex water system would inadvertently pay for the program in any of those options. Now, in regards to what would it cost or what would the impact be? So if you look through those options and you look through the notes I put at the bottom, the single largest impact to the rate would be option 4. It is the cheapest option in the long run, but the single largest impact because we would spend all that money in one given year. So basically, the treasurer, Estelle, and I kind of worked out what is a 1% increase to our water rates looking at 2022, and about $28,000. Now, I will tell you, the Camstra proposal, which is the option 1, is already built into the budget and the rates that we are considering next week at budget. So that's already been built in. So any variation to that, you can kind of read in those notes. So not a direct fee to the individual user when we show up to put the meter in, absorbed by the larger water rate, and in most scenarios, amortized over 10 years.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Jonathan, just clarification to that is, you're saying it's built in at 25%, right? At the recommended, at the 25% level that Watson's are recommending, right?
To you, Mayor, we've split the cost basically 50-50. Okay. So basically it's about $400,000 a year, give or take. 250% of it is built into our operational costs. Okay. So staff was able to shake out $200,000 in and around out of our operational costs in order to make room for this program to exist. The capital portion, the other additional $200,000, will be considered as part, it'll be built into that rate, but not necessarily into the 25%. And I say that because that 25% is more a reserve kind of discussion. Okay. So if we do this, basically 200,000 come out of reserves. It's kind of that give or take is the way you got to think of it.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from council? Councillor Moyer, then the deputy mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I'm sort of the same thinking as Councillor Hemming on this. I was a little surprised to get this report and then be asked to make a decision on it this quickly, especially when we're looking at budgets for next week. I see it as sort of a budget item as well. So and with the other projects and the other issues that we have with our water, adding more cost to it right now, I don't know whether that's a tough decision, I think, for council right now.
Thanks, Gord. Deputy Mayor Ellison.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. I'd like to have a little more understanding of the new hire you referred to, and I'm not understanding the rationale for a new hire. We've had the water system running for a number of years. Why do we need a new hire?
So through the mayor to Deputy Mayor Cornelison, it is the meter exchange change out and the things. So the administration, the scheduling, the ordering of the materials and so on are done with current staff. But to install a meter, there's a special certification, basically a 3-day course. I will say that I have reached out to local plumbers in the area to see what their appetite is, and we haven't gotten great reception from them to do it. So when they present that, Aqua still hasn't got back to me. It's a different job than what it is to do the administration and then be physically out there changing the meter. The reality of the new hire is that once those meters are installed, and let's say the next 9 years, it's hard pressed for it to be a full-time job. But it's more than what the administration side cannot be administrating and organizing and scheduling along with other duties and be the person out in the field installing the meter. They're two different things. That's where the new hire comes from.
Okay, then one more question. Was there an option to do nothing?
Through the mayor to the deputy mayor, there's always that option.
Is it one of the 4 options?
No, and through the mayor to the deputy mayor, I gave you the options based off of our last conversation. What did Strathroy do? What meters did they use? What is it in, like, what is it against? Through the mayor, though, there is also the recommendation that council can reevaluate this at a later date. So that's not the do nothing option, but that is the reevaluate at a later time. It'd be the do nothing right now option, basically.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councillor McClinchy, you have another?
Okay, since we're going to be meeting next week for budget, but water, that will be on the budget, will it not? Is that one of the things that we have to decide? And can we not defer that till next week? Because I don't feel comfortable making any decision on any of the options tonight.
Okay. All right, we had, who had their hand up? Sorry, Councillor Nickel.
Yeah, did I understand, Jonathan, that you're still waiting for Aqua to give you some figures to put this all together?
Through the mayor to Councillor Nickel, yes. So the option as presented where it's North Middlesex and Aqua where I carry no cost could very well change.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Cornelison.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Jonathan, another thing that I forgot to ask earlier, well, ask now, is I did read in the presentation that it would be approximately $17,000 a month to read the meters. Is that correct? So that's an added cost. Now, is that cost going to be assigned to those residences that have the meters, or is that system-wide?
Through the mayor, the deputy mayor, system-wide. And you did read that correctly. That was a way, and I'll let Mike speak to the breakdown of the 17 and so on. Mike has done, I think this is the 7th or 8th iteration of this. Mike is very in the know when it comes to how those numbers were brought, but it would be to everybody that uses water in the system, not to the individual.
Okay, so that would be roughly in the ballpark of $200,000 a year. Is that correct?
Correct.
And those funds would come then from the increase in rates, I would assume.
We've shaken out operational costs. Basically, we set our operational budget last year and physically we couldn't obtain everything. So we took a look at it and you've seen it, you will see it, you're looking at it. And basically we shook out money.
Okay, and then one final question. In reading the report, the presentation made reference to why should the little lady in town be paying for the pig farm, but we're not reading meters anyway, so I need some help understanding that.
So we still read meters every quarter. and we still produce everybody's consumption on it. The entirety of our rates is still based entirely off of people's consumption. The more you move, the more you pay.
Okay, now one final question, because I know we talked about it, that for the single person living alone and the usage is low, that we'd be cutting the 250 meter a year. Will that be for all people that are using less than that?
That's correct. So, and that is purely, it's nothing to do with where you live or anything like that. It is purely just based off the math. You move 50 cubic meters or low, that is our current recommendation to council to be considered next Wednesday there. That is correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions from council? A comment I would make, because of waiting to hear from Aqua a little bit, Jonathan. I personally wouldn't be too comfortable with the first recommendations, whether they want to defer it to the budget meeting or whether council wants to defer it. Option number 4 was to reevaluate for the next year's budget, you know, on this, to have more time. I think that's one of those two options, at least to hear a little bit more information from the Aqua option would be good. Just a comment more than anything. Other questions from council on this? Deputy Mayor, did you want to break down from Mike of that cost per month?
17.
Yeah, the 17,000. Did you want more of a breakdown on it?
No, well, thank you, Mayor Rob, but I believe it's in the report, and
Okay.
I don't recall the exact numbers, but it is in the report.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure you were good with it.
Thank you.
So other questions, comments from council? Seeing none, we have some recommendations in front of you. And there's
Mayor,
different recommendations. What is council's wish? Jonathan, did you want to speak?
We could put a recommendation that it be evaluated at next week's budget meeting as well, obviously, right? It's not built into that report, but like recommendation could come forth and could be considered like that.
That's always the option for council to decide, right? That they could do that as well. So I'm looking for direction from council on this. Mayor, Councilor McClinchy, sorry, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I would make a motion that we defer that to budget meeting next week, basically.
Okay. Councilor Nickel, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, I would make a motion to defer it until we get all of the facts and figures, including what Aqua's figures would be.
Okay, so we have a motion first in front of us, and that was from Councilor McClinchy, and that was to defer it to budget next week on the 9th and 10th. We need a seconder for that. Councilor Keogh is seconding that. In favor of that? In favor? 2 in favor, opposed? Okay, that motion is defeated. Councilor Nickel, you had another motion you wanted to make?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we defer this until we have all the facts and figures, including that coming from Aqua, at which time we can sit down and reevaluate it.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that?
Mayor Rob, I have a question.
Okay, let me get a seconder first. Do we have a seconder? Councilor Moyer, you're seconding? Okay, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Councilor Nickel, just to understand your motion properly, are you saying that we then apply option 4, which is that we reevaluate over the course of the next year?
I feel like until we get all the facts and figures, that we shouldn't even be looking at until next year. I just feel that it's very premature to look at it until we have the facts and figures when we're looking at budget lines.
I agree. Okay, fair enough.
Okay. Any other discussion on that? No other discussion. In favor? In favor?
Might as well.
Carried. Carried. That is carried. So yeah, we will look forward, Jonathan, to hear if we have another option there, or what's some information on that, okay? Thank you very much, sir. We've made our motion on that, sorry. The next one is a report from the engineering technologist on the asset management plan. And this was prepared by Aubrey. We do have Aubrey with us.
Through your worship, she's just coming into the Zoom call.
We'll just give her a second to come in and we'll There she is. How are
Thank
you,
you,
Aubrey?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So Aubrey, if you're ready, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. To your worship and members of the council, the staff is seeking approval for the 2021 asset management plan. We ask that the identified financial strategies be incorporated within the North Middlesex annual budget process towards the allocation of appropriate funding, whereby addressing the municipality's current and future infrastructure deficit. Before I hand over the presentation to our guest speaker from Public Sector Digest, I would like to point out some key highlights from the report. First, this AMP identifies an annual infrastructure deficit of $3.3 million. This deficit only pertains to our linear asset, so only our roads, storm and sanitary sewers, and water network. This does not include our facilities, buildings, machineries, and equipment and vehicles. The deficit does not take into consideration any future growth either. Second, things to keep in mind with the following report. The AMP, it has locked, this AMP is lacking the conditional assessments. So we relied heavily on the age of each assets to guess the condition of mostly 85% of all the assets that we have. Assets that may look good on paper, might not necessarily be functioning as it should be, therefore misstating the true conditions. Finally, the AMP is a living document. This document requires continued refinement. The hours and hours used to produce the following AMP is only the beginning. As part of the OREG, we are required to do annual progress review, and this document must be updated every 5 years. Without any further ado, I guess I would hand over the presentation to Mai Abdu. She is the asset management consultant, Public Sector Digest. Mai?
Thank you, Aubrey. I hope everyone can hear me. Perfect. Thank you, Aubrey, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me today. I'm just going to share my screen, and you can let me know when you can see it. One second, just loading. Alrighty, so that should be big enough for everyone to see, I hope.
Yes, it looks good.
Excellent, thank you. For inviting me again, my name is May Abdu. I was the asset management consultant working with your staff to be able to develop this asset management plan. So I'm excited to be bringing it forward. And just before I get started, I wanted to quickly give a shout out to your staff. They really put a lot of time and effort and commitment to be able to develop and present you with a quality document that you can rely on. So really kudos to them. So with the development and the approval of this asset management plan, the municipality will be in compliance with the first leg of the Ontario regulation of 58817. There's really three main AMPs that are required of municipalities in Ontario. So with this one, we cover the 2022 requirement. So the focus being the core assets, as Aubrey mentioned, that's your roads, bridges, water, wastewater, and storm. Come 2024, that's really the second AMP or deadline. That's going to encompass all of your assets, including your non-core. So your buildings, your vehicles, machinery and equipment, etc. And then finally, come 2025, this is really the last flavor of AMP. It's going to focus on all of your assets, but when it comes to levels of service, it's going to focus on your proposed or target levels of service. Whereas in this plan that we're presenting today, we focus on the current levels of service, not the proposed or target. So within this plan, we've identified what your current levels of service are, some that are mandated by the province, some that staff really wanted to track to aid in the decision-making process. We've also documented the different strategies that you employ, whether it's prioritization and risk strategies, life cycle strategies, And we've also documented some of your growth and demographic assumptions. Now, whenever you look at this asset management plan or any asset management plans in the future, we always want to look at them through the lens of service management. So your assets are conduits to your services. If you think of your roads and your bridges, those provide a transportation service for your residents, for people, for goods. When you think of your fire trucks, they provide a very important emergency service. And because the focus of this AMP is the core, a lot of these core assets impact other services as well, where the asset is not the direct link. So if you think of your roads and bridges, they impact your emergency services. If your fire trucks, for example, have a level of service where they need to reach their destination in 4 or 5 minutes, if your roads or your bridges are not in a good state of repair or performance, that's going to impact that level of service for your fire trucks. So it's really all tied to that service that that asset is providing. And there's really 3 main elements or factors that we try to juggle, or it's a trade-off between these 3 elements. The first is the cost. So the cost of that service that you're providing, is it affordable? Is it sustainable? And by extension, what's the cost of maintaining this asset? And when we talk about cost, we're not just talking about upfront capital cost, building it or purchasing it. We're looking at the entirety of that asset, from maintenance, rehabilitation, replacement, and for some assets, even disposal or retirement obligations. So we're looking at the full life of that asset. The second piece is performance, and a big piece of performance is going to be condition, and we'll touch on that in a few slides. But how well is this service being offered, and how well are our assets performing to provide this service? And then finally, the last element there is risk, and that makes sense to everyone here. There's always going to be some sort of tolerance or risk that we're willing to live with, health and safety risks, operational risks. So it's all about juggling those 3 elements. And that's what we did within this plan and the project with staff, at least for the core assets at this time. So jumping into some of the stats here, and please keep in mind that every asset management plan is a snapshot in time. So this asset management plan is based on 2020 year-end data. That's the latest data that we had available at the time. So anything past 2020 is not going to be part of this plan. So for the municipality, in terms of your overall replacement cost or asset portfolio valuation, the municipality has about $474 million worth of assets. And this is just core assets. We're not looking at non-core. With about 50% of those assets or that value coming from the water network. So a lot of assets, a lot of investments. And if you look at what that looks like per household in terms of the value that they share, it's almost about $200,000 that they're sharing in terms of these assets. So it's quite the investment that we're making when we're trying to manage these assets that we have. The second piece of this, as I mentioned, is performance. And a key aspect of that is condition. So as you look at that graph at the top, you see a lot of greens and blues. A lot of those assets are in the very good and the good. And that's great. Actually, overall, about 83% of your assets are in fair or better condition. But it's important to understand where that information is coming from. So do we trust this condition information? How reliable is it? And that's really where that table at the bottom comes in. So you'll see for the roads, and I apologize if it's a little too small for anyone. For the road network, for your asphalt roads, 98% of those assets were assessed as part of your 2019 road needs study. That is a reliable source of data. We know it's more or less accurate, which is great. If you look at your bridges and culverts, 100% of those assets were assessed as part of your bridge inspections, your biennial OSIM bridge inspections. That's fantastic. That's also a source of data that we can trust. But for all of the other assets, as Audrey mentioned, it is 100% based on age. And as we know, age is not always the best determinant of performance. You can have assets that are far past their service life that are still doing great. They're still operating and functioning optimally. And you might have assets that you just built in yesterday or purchased, and they're failing prematurely. So age is not the best determinant to be using when we're trying to to have accurate or reliable outcomes. And that's really where I wanted to add this little slide here, the importance of having a condition assessment strategy and a data governance strategy. Because again, as we know, garbage in is going to be garbage out. So without reliable condition information to feed or to drive your capital planning, it's going to be very unreliable. Now, a few things that we can consider doing is CCTV inspections on your storm and your sewer. Right now, since everything is age-based, having that condition information, that direct physical condition information is going to be super valuable. And being able to build some sort of data governance strategy where the way you collect the data is standardized, how often you update it. So every 10 to 15 years, maybe every year we're doing 10 or 20% of the network. If you look at your road needs study, doing it every 3 to 5 years. OSIMs every 2 to 4 years, depending on the structures in question. Having some sort of consistent and standardized approach to collecting data is going to be very critical to the outcomes of your plan and your budgeting. Jumping back into the financial side of things. So taking that $474 million and dividing it by the entire life of your assets, we have about $6.6 million of annual capital requirements. So that's essentially how much money you need on an annual basis to maintain your current inventory of capital assets. So this doesn't include growth. It doesn't include future assets. This is just purely what you need to do to be able to maintain your current inventory. And as you can see in that spike in that 2050, that spike primarily belongs to the water network. And so the question is, do we have enough money, enough reserves in place to be able to manage these future peaks? And again, this graph is highly dependent on the condition information that we plug in. So when that information is updated, these peaks, we would hope, would plateau as well. Now, taking that $6.6 million of annual requirements, subtracting the capital funding that's available, we're left with about $3.3 million of a deficit. So essentially, we're saying that the municipality is funding 50% of its long-term requirements. And one thing to note is that this capital funding available only takes into account consistent and sustainable sources of revenue. So we're talking gas tax, OSIF. No one-time grants or transfers are part of this because they're not consistent. Of course, they're going to continue to be part of your, a critical part of your revenue source, but they cannot be factored into these plans. Now, to bridge or to fully fund that $3.3 million deficit, we've recommended a few strategies. So for your tax-funded assets, we've recommended about 1.4% tax increase for the next 15 years. For your water assets, about 3.3% for the next 20 years. And for your sewer, we've recommended that you maintain your current rate. And these are recommendations. These are not static. They're very much dependent on how staff prioritize their projects and what kind of desired or target levels of service the council ultimately wants to meet. And again, one thing to really stress is that, for that water, that 3.3%, that's just capital. We're not even looking at operating and maintenance. We're not looking at growth. So this is just purely to maintain your capital. So it's quite the investment that we're trying to make to these assets. And then just finally to wrap up with this last slide here, the key takeaways from this project and this plan, first and foremost, is the continuous refinement of data. So as staff continue to operationalize their asset management database and utilize it for capital planning, we want to make sure that there's, again, like I said, a data governance strategy in place to make sure that condition information is updated regularly, replacement cost information is updated regularly, and that we can trust the outcomes of the plan. When looking at the 2024 and 2025 requirements, the 2024, of course, we're going to focus on the non-core. So this is the perfect time to start looking at collecting condition information for those kind of assets. Do we need to have a building condition assessment on all our critical assets? What kind of information are we missing that we should start collecting so that we're ready for that 2024 deadline? And then for the 2025 deadline, we want to start looking at having intelligent conversations with our public in terms of what levels of service can we provide, what kind of expectations do they have around these levels of service, and what is ultimately affordable and sustainable for the municipality. And then just finally, to end on what Aubrey said, is that this asset management plan and the program as a whole is a living document. It's dynamic. It's meant to be used as a guide and a supporting document for your budget deliberations, for your capital planning. And so this plan that we're presenting here today is really the foundation for that work to come. Thank you so much. That's about it for my presentation. I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mai. So questions from council on this? Deputy Mayor Cornelison, you're first.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Rob. Very interesting presentation. Thank you very much. Certainly there's some concerning information that you shared here tonight. One of the comments you made towards the end of your presentation, which I found very interesting, was affordable and sustainable for the municipality. My question is, how can we make sure that's affordable and sustainable for our residents? Because if we're have a $3 million shortfall now, the increase in the revenue that we need to generate would be seriously detrimental to a number of people living in our municipality. We may become a ghost town. Do you have any answers for that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll try to answer that. That is a tough question, to be honest, but it goes back to, again, the inventory that we're maintaining and the level of service that we're trying to provide. I think every municipality in Ontario is in that same sort of deficit, dealing with assets that are being downloaded to them, assets that they're unable to maintain. They're all kind of reaching their end of life, because they were purchased or built around the same time. So it's going to be a very important conversation to have about what assets should we keep, what assets are we able to maintain, where we can have a level of service that the public can find acceptable, and we're okay with that risk and the cost and the performance. So it's, again, that trade-off between those three main elements. And I hope that wasn't too vague of an answer.
Well, I'm going to try and clarify that, because what I thought I heard you say is that if some of the assets reach the end of their life, the municipality then has the option of saying, okay, we no longer need that asset, we'll just shut it down.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So that is not what I'm saying. That could be what I'm saying. It depends, right? And I think, Jonathan, you'd like to add something there?
Through your worship to Deputy Mayor Cornelison, in fact, those are the conversations that we need to start having. The brass tacks is that, if your reference to a ghost town being unsustainable in terms of the cost implications to the residents locally to North Middlesex, what we're going to have to start doing is systematically considering the decommissioning of assets and the relevance to the corporation in maintaining it. A very easy one to tangibly quantify is a bridge. There's nothing under the Highway Traffic Act that says that we have to maintain that bridge being open. But if it's open, it needs to meet a certain threshold of dependability and risk tolerance. If that risk tolerance or the bridge no longer becomes dependable, we're going to have a conversation about decommissioning said bridge. That is not a popular conversation, but that's the evolution of asset management as we go through life cycle renewal and making sure that there's other forms of opportunity for funding or financing. And there will be grants that come through, but what we can't do for the long range forecast for any asset management is depend on those grants coming through. So this is more of a primer for the conversations that need to come year over year as we consider budget impacts. And that kind of reflects the recommendation from Aubrey. We did not identify a number because a number is hard for someone to grasp, but rather we should be putting these best principles forward in consideration of our budgets moving ahead. So I will go that far out and say we need to start considering that.
You read my mind when you mentioned some of the assets that you were talking about. Thank you.
The other part of this that we haven't talked about, and that's one of the main reasons for growth and to be able to maintain is the impact, having growth impact as well. Other questions from council? No other questions from council?
Through your worship, Aubrey,
Yes,
can I ask you to go through the recommendations again?
The recommendation is that the council approve the 2021 North Middlesex Asset Management Plan as presented And then further that the identified AMP financial strategies be incorporated within the North Middlesex annual budget process towards the allocation of appropriate funding, whereby addressing the municipality's future and current infrastructure deficits.
Okay. Anything else from council? We have a recommendation. Deputy Mayor Cornelison.
I do have a question to clarify the recommendation, if I may, Mayor Rob.
Okay. Yep.
Does a recommendation then entail that the municipality will then begin to raise an additional $3.3 million on an annual basis to meet the shortfall? Is that in fact the recommendation?
Go ahead, Johnson.
Through your worship, the recommendation is to start taking these first principles to the asset management in consideration to our budget. The timing was staff wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of our asset management plan while we go through budget consideration. So next week, when we start doing our budget deliberation, we should be thinking about these in the background, and we also should be thinking about the end result of renewing some of our reserves in order to make sure that we have the proper funding in place. It may evolve as we move along with this living document that we're going to be able to recommend certain amounts based off the constraints of taxation. But at this moment right now, again, we have kind of already been discussed before. We have a lot on the docket with a lot of priorities that we need to consider. So right now it's just setting down the base work that we just want the culture and themes of asset management in our budgetary process.
So just to clarify, because part of what I read in this presentation was received was a 1.4% annual tax increase and a 3.3% in water rate increase to meet future needs. So if we approve this recommendation, that will not be applied right now. It'll be considered down the road. Is that true?
That is correct.
That is correct. That's the intention of the recommendation.
Thank you.
It's another tool for us to look at when we're doing our budgeting process.
Thank
Jackie.
you.
Jackie?
I'm wondering, in light of Deputy Mayor's question of the impact of that motion, would it be that council, instead of the word incorporated, that the financial strategies be considered within the North Middlesex's annual budget process? It's something.
Okay.
Through your worship, I'd also like to just clarify that the intention of Aubrey's portfolio as our technologist will be bringing forward the asset management on a regular basis in and around the budget cycle, so that this isn't something new every single year. It's something that's complementing our discussions moving ahead. And that's just going through the province of Ontario on the regulation that's presented before us. It's going to be evolving for the next 3 to 4 years. 2025, I believe, is the last one.
Deputy Mayor, are you more comfortable with that?
I am more comfortable with the dialogue that the clerk brought forward, Mayor Rob.
Considered instead of incorporated? Correct, Jackie? That was your.
That's my recommendation to amend, if that's a better comfort level.
I'm more comfortable with that. Yes, I am.
Okay, so are you moving this recommendation, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, I am.
Okay, moved by the Deputy Mayor. Seconder, Councillor Nicol, in favor. In favor, carried. Thank you, Mai, for your presentation, and also Aubrey, I want to thank you for all the work you've put into this as well.
You're welcome, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So our next report is from Manager of Public Works, the results of the gravel, salt, brine, and calcium chloride tenders. And Jonathan, are you doing that, or is Ed coming in?
Coming in.
Ed's coming in? Okay. That is a big number for gravel this year.
Yeah.
That is a big number.
Way big.
I don't think it's more tonnage. It's just because of the trucking has gone up, correct? That's what it's boiling down to.
Basically a 9% increase from last year.
All right, we'll just wait for Ed to come in. Do his.
There we are.
Hi, Ed. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Good. All right. Well, go ahead, Ed, and do your presentation for this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Your Worship Council, you have in front of you the report from our awards for tender for gravel and salt and calcium chloride that happens on an annual basis. Our recommendation is that council receive the report and award the 2022 gravel tender to McCann Ready Mix for the quantity of approximately 75,000 ton in the amount of 1,428,000, and that council awards the 2022 salt brine tender to 552976 Ontario Limited, care of Cliff Holland, in the amount of $170,856, and that council awards the 2022 calcium chloride tender to 552976 Ontario Limited, care of Cliff Holland, in the amount of $150,922.80. Like everything, the numbers have not changed. They just the tonnage has carried over from last year. Like everything else that is happening these days, the costs have gone up.
Thank you, Ed. Questions from council? Jonathan, did you want to add something there first?
Through your worship, if I could just make sure that we understand the position that the organization has rolled out with this document. The intention was to set a baseline amount in order to get the best cost as it would be per tonnage. The budget amount for gravel is $875,000. Salt brine was $45,000. This is proposed for 2022, and $17,000 for calcium chloride. Am I wrong in that, Estelle? 170,000. 170. My apologies. So the intention is, especially with the gravel, is that we're not purchasing per se the full amount, but rather the flexibility of having the best unit cost that we could get to in the industry. So a little bit of a gap that we can clean up, but that's the intention. And that's been similarly the approach that we've done year over year with these tender documents.
Now, questions from council. We had some hands up. Councillor Keogh first.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Ed, yes, I think everyone's in the understanding that things do go up, but I myself have started to come to the fact that I question why things have gone up. If that is the normal or in the area of tonnage that we normally get, and I think we've always run, or at least if memory serves me correctly, over the past 3 years in the budget process, we've been around that million or $1.1 million is a static number. A $300,000 increase for gravel. I know fuel has gone up, but it hasn't gone up that much. Other bids that did come in, how far off the mark were they? I just don't think that a $300,000 increase, if memory serves me correctly, is something that I could really swallow.
Through the mayor to Councillor Kehoe, last year's numbers for the gravel was $1,309,500. So it was a 9% increase. The other numbers that we had that came in for the same amount of tonnage was $1,449,000 and $1,610,250.
And were they local? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, John.
Were they local suppliers as well?
The E.W. Blaine and Lavis Contracting.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Wait, another question. I think Councillor Hemming, did you have your hand up? Go ahead.
Yes, through you, Mayor Rob. Just a question. We're ordering 75. We're looking at 75,000 tons of gravel, right? If we get that every year, like how much would do we have left out of that 75,000 at this point in time? And can we not just decide to top it up to the 75,000? Again, I'm thinking of trying to save money, because what we got coming in front of us this year and next year is just horrendous. So I just wanted to wonder if that was an option too.
Jonathan Lamley.
Through the mayor. Councillor Hemming and Keo, you're kind of hitting around the same kind of stuff, right? So just so everybody's on the same page, basically our budget's 857. You divide that back by the 1904, you're going to find that we're going to use about 46,000 tons. Our current 2021 gravel to date is about $860,000. So what this is a unit-based contract. Obviously, the more we use, the more we're going to pay. It's not to say that we're going to use 1.4 million. We anticipate that we're going to use 857 divided by that 1904, which is going to be about 46,000 tons. That is a typical operating for us. What we've seen in the past is that when we get into those heavy rains and we get scouring and cutting on roads, that number drifts a bit. We need more gravel, fill it in. Those are the natural things that we're up against. It's not to use the 1.4. And further, this is the same report that has been brought for the last 6 or 7 years. That number that's been in that recommendation has always been much higher than what is actually consumed, used, and placed on our roads.
Okay, Councillor Hemming, do you have a follow-up?
Well, yeah, okay then. So that being said, so the 1.3 that we're looking at, or sorry, the 1.4 that we're looking at, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be spending the 1.4, right? If you say we have 40,000, say roughly, it's half. So we're only looking around 800,000 then.
That's correct.
Okay.
Honestly,
Okay.
what we've kind of set up, Councillor Hemming, it's kind of facetious, to be honest, on our part. When we go and tell somebody that we're going to buy 75,000 ton and we move 45, they're pricing us at 75, but we're only moving 45. The reality is, if we told them we were moving 46 or 50,000 ton, 19 might become 21.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that,
yeah, right. And that's just what it is. Now, if we do get into like a horrendous situation, we will use more gravel. I don't think we're going to use that much gravel, but we will use more gravel, right? That's not the intention. It's unit based. How much we move, weigh tickets, calculated, put into the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Cornelison, a follow-up question.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Rob. My question is for Ed. Ed, what strategies do you have in place to keep the gravel on the road as opposed to being plowed or graded into the ditches? Because we're losing a lot of gravel in our ditches. What strategies do you intend to incorporate to prevent that from happening?
Well, I know the grading operation, we do have a device that I'm going to be implementing that all the operators, the grader operators, be trained on the windrow so that we keep the product on the road where it should be. Now, as for winter time, that becomes a little bit more difficult. We don't really have a lot of control when we're plowing those roads at keeping it off the sides. But as well, it's, you know, the drainage, working with drainage as well, in conjunction with that department, keeping the slope, the stability of the road, proper construction. That's what I'm aiming at. Yeah.
So is it then your strategy to, because in the past, sometimes the gravel's been put on the roads before they're graded. And so you have a hard compact base when people drive over, the stones just fly into the ditch. So will you then incorporate a strategy where the road is graded prior to the gravel being put on and then graded again to incorporate it all?
That's the way it should be, because if it's literally putting something on a slippery surface. So if you're putting gravel down, it should be scratched up to make that abrasive surface so that it adheres better.
Okay, and then one final question. We have a number of roads that are basically just laneways for farm equipment. Right. And that are no residences, no agricultural structures on it whatsoever. You won't be putting gravel on those roads again, will you?
No, there's going to be patches where we may have to touch up where the heavy farm equipment has ripped up those roads. But they move around the municipality. So last year they would have been for example, the northeast area, a little bit to the southwest, well, they're going to move around to different roads. So we're not going to be continually putting gravel on the same roads.
Okay. One final question, then I'll pass it on. And that is, in some respects, I feel that this recommendation is a little bit premature in that we have not done budget yet. So I don't, is it a significant barrier or hurdle if we defer this until after the budget process is completed?
I'm going to ask Jonathan for.
Jonathan Lampman, go ahead.
Through the mayor to the deputy mayor, you're locking in a rate by accepting this. So
will 1 week make a difference?
We haven't reached out to the contractor to see if we can make a difference, but it's got to, the budget set at 875,000. So by making this tender award, you're not extending yourself to $1.4 million because it is a quantity driven commodity. The more we move, the more we pay. The budget, which you can consider, is the amount of gravel that's going to go on the road. That's next week. But if you were to come back to us next week and say, we want $500,000 worth of gravel, we would still have this tender outstanding. So to make the award, we basically lock our unit rate and we know where we're going forward. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to change the budget number. You still have full authority and full ability to change it next week when we deliberate on what the gravel roads budget will be.
Thank you.
Okay, just a comment to that, Adrian. If you remember a few years ago, we did start tendering the gravel and the salt brine and calcium early ahead of our budget because we got better price. Right. That's what staff was telling us at that time. We were tendering too late. Just a comment to that question. Other questions? Councillor Moyer. You're muted, Gord. You're muted.
How's that?
Yep, we got you.
Thanks, Mayor. This is for Ed again. Ed, and this goes along with the I guess the graveling program that we've talked about for a couple of years of possibly cutting back a little bit on the graveling and paving and maybe finding some savings. Looking at the cost of the gravel now, would we be better to do less graveling, a little bit more grading, and even if we doubled our calcium chloride bill by grading and have to put calcium on a second time, we'd still probably be saving money. Have you looked at any programs at all like that?
I'm just starting to dive into that. I've got a few things in the back of my head that I do want to work on. It's up in the air, which I don't really want to be too forthright at this point until I have all the facts. But I do have a couple of ideas that I have talked to Jonathan Lampman quickly about. And yeah, my look in the future is to reduce and actually improve the quality of our gravel roads.
Yeah. I think it's with all the projects we have coming up, I think it's important that we look at every aspect of our budget. And if we can find savings and, if there's some services that need to be cut, I think we need to look at that. It's going to be
absolutely, yeah.
So
it's going to be
maybe in the
to swallow,
future.
but I think,
sorry, Gordon, didn't mean to cut you off. In the future, maybe we can get a report when you just kind of put some information like that together, and that you can bring a report to council with some of the ideas going forward. Right, yes, Jonathan Graham, you had your hand up.
Through your worship, and to kind of answer some of Councillor Gord Moore's question, in 2022 we are not putting any programs in place for paving. So we've opted not to do that in 2022. That coincides with our asset management. We're coming out of a cycle of renewal, but that'll pick back up in the next couple of years. What we're really striving for in the conversation with gravel roads is a level of service discussion in terms of keeping them safe and travelable and changing that analysis. historically, in the context of road configuration and road networks, gravel roads are the cheapest and most reliable road to maintain and operate. We do have a vast network. We're the largest geographical area in the county of Middlesex with a huge road network. So if we're going to start playing with shelving one project versus the next, and that's what we've asked to consider for priorities for the budget, is that we need to speak to levels of service with gravel roads, because that is a tricky one because of the nature in which they need renewal. And if you look at, like, I think it's 380 kilometers that we have of graveled roads, $1 million investment year over year compared to what we have to invest into asphalt is a good compromise in terms of our sustainability and having a quality road. But again, that can be something discussed later in future as we kind of drill down a proper program and start allowing Ed to have the opportunity to kind of sculpt the program as it would be.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from council? Seeing no other questions, we have a recommendation in front of us, and that is to receive and approve the tenders for the gravel, the salt brine, and the calcium chloride. What is your wish? Moved by Councillor Nicol. Seconder? No seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hemming. In favor? It is carried. Thank you. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So that is the last of our reports. We do have passing of accounts, and that is from our treasurer, Estelle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What you have in front of you is a report outlining the municipality's expenses from January 14th to January 27th for a total of $560,903.42. Are there any questions?
Questions from council? Deputy Mayor Canales.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. And once again, my question is for Jonathan Lappin, if I may. And Jonathan, I'm looking at the accounts payable here, and I see that we're paying SEMA Canada and Collier project leaders for exactly the same projects. Is that a duplication of service, or why are we paying two different organizations for the same projects?
Through the mayor to Deputy Mayor Cornelison. When we recommended the report, we brought Collier's on as project managers. So Collier's is managing, I can produce, and I'll produce the documents and stuff like that. They basically run the meetings, help manage the timeline, schedule, create schedules, risk management, so on and so forth. That's what Collier's is doing. SEMA is doing the physical design. And that price is divided amongst the three projects.
Oh, so we don't have the capacity to manage that in-house?
At this current time, and when we took on the project, no, we did not.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Other questions on the accounts? Seeing no other questions on the accounts, we need a motion to pay our bills. Councillor Keogh, Councillor Moyer, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Estelle.
Thank you.
Committee reports, Lake Huron, nothing there. ABCA, Deputy Mayor Canelson.
No January meeting.
Okay. Blue Water. EDAC, Local School Advisory.
Nothing.
Okay. The Recreation Committee hasn't met. Policy Committee has not met for a little bit. Fire Committee.
We had one tentatively scheduled for February, Mayor Rob, but due to a scheduling conflict, it may be pushed off until March.
Okay, thank you. Aqua Advisory, nothing there, Jonathan. And the Budget Committee. So as everyone knows, you have your binders and it's been through the committee. So we're meeting on next week on the 9th and 10th that we'll be meeting. I look forward to a good wholesome conversation on our budgets for those 2 nights. So we have nothing else on the committees. Correspondence.
Mayor Rob.
Yes, go ahead.
Can I just get a motion to acknowledge the budget, the second budget committee meeting minutes? Because it's now concluded, so I need them approved.
Okay, sorry. I need a motion to approve those. Councillor McClinchy, second by Councillor Kehoe, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Jackie. Correspondence. AuSable Bayfield Conservation Authority Annual Flood Forecasting and Emergency Response Meeting. Receive and file. The Blue Water Recycling Association Board of Directors meeting, the highlights from January. Receive and file. Middlesex London Paramedic Services Vaccine Initiative update. Receive and file. The last one is funding support for infrastructure projects, bridge culvert replacements in rural municipalities. Deputy Mayor Ellison.
I would like to support that request for motion for support.
Your motion to support, a seconder?
Yeah.
Councillor Moyer, all in favor? Carried. Carried. Thank you. So other and urgent business. The first one is the Animal Control 2021 Annual Report, North Middlesex Lobo. That's just a receive and file report. Jackie, do you want to speak to that or?
Yes, Mayor Rob, that is their annual report from our kennels, and it's just a receiving for information.
Okay, any questions on that? And the other one is Estelle, you had for other business?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a reminder to council members, please forward to me any budget questions that you may have prior to next week's deliberation meetings. So it will give me the opportunity to prepare a formal response and send that response to all members of council. So far, I've received one question.
But that's not saying you can't, not to ask that same question at the meetings.
Absolutely not.
It's
I'm
just
sorry.
to give you, so we get the answers to our questions.
Correct, absolutely. I will send the answer to the question, and that will be how we will start the meeting at deliberation time to make sure that, again, all council members know what the answers are and for the members of the public.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on that, anyone? Seeing none, is there any other business at this time? Seeing no other business, deferred items are in front of you. Communications, including county council. Adrian.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Rob. I thought I would share with the members of council the initiative that the county is doing through Deputy Mayor Elliott from Thames Center for Michael Landsberg and the presentation that he's doing. And the Zoom website is on the county website, is it not? I believe the Zoom connection for that. It's on tonight and I believe again tomorrow night. Am I correct in that, Mayor Rob?
I think it was last night and tonight, right? Last night was for the youth.
Okay, I thought it was tonight and tomorrow night. I'm not sure.
That one, the first one was designed for the youth. That was.
Yes, it was.
You're hoping to get youth for that one. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I thought it was excellent work on behalf of Deputy Mayor Elliott, and she did, or Councilor Elliott, and she did a great job.
Yes. Anything else?
Nothing else.
Okay, I think that's the main thing. I just, for information for council and staff, the Middlesex Budget Committee has had 3 meetings. There'll probably be 2 more before it goes to council, but they're working on that at the time. I think that's it for county. Any questions for the county? Anyone?
I have one.
Go ahead.
Just out of curiosity, Mayor Rob, are your budget meeting deliberations in person or are they via Zoom?
We have been able to meet in person because we're keeping, one department head at a time is coming in. And so, as you know, it's a big room and it's not a large group. So yeah, we've been able to do them in person much better than what we did last year on Zoom.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that. Much more effective. Thank you.
Yeah. So we're looking at to go into closed session. And Jackie, do you want to just state the reasons?
Yes, so the reason council is going into closed session this evening is under 2 exceptions under the Municipal Act. The first one is for security of the property of the municipality, which is pertaining to a Lake Huron water supply matter. The second exception is a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality, which is in relation to an agreement of purchase and sale bylaw number 12 of 2022 on the agenda this evening. So the live session will be resuming following our closed session, which will then be considering the bylaws and the adjournment for the night. So we're looking for a motion from council to go into closed session for these 2 matters.
Moved by Councillor Keogh, seconded by Councillor McClinchy. Carried. Pardon me, all in favor. Carried. A little ahead of myself, sorry. All right, we'll just wait for a minute until